Bad news, everybody. We are not getting a break from new book releases because November is looking like a banger of a month, just as October was. Today, I'll be focusing on fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, as always. Not a whole lot of sci-fi coming out, but oh boy, is there a lot of fantasy. If you enjoy these kinds of videos, go ahead and subscribe. I do these every single month and have been doing them for quite a few years now, highlighting brand new books to put on your radar, giving you more options to read, as is my duty. So let's jump right on into this list of books coming out in November 2023. Starting on November 7th, a very highly anticipated sequel is hitting shelves, and that is The Hunting Moon. This is the sequel in the Luminary series, where the spooky forest exists and these nightmare monsters dwell in the mist, and our main character is part of the society where it's her job to kill these monsters in order to protect everyone. Add in some drama from a rival group and you have an on the edge of your seat YA fantasy. This one sees us with even more threats from the paranormal and even more higher stakes as our main character has to deal with some new responsibilities. This is recommended for Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans, and I can see exactly why. Swarm. This is a dark, moody, terrifying horror story where our protagonists learn from the news that when people are bitten by butterflies, they become infected and their body begins to decompose as they turn into something zombie-like. Well, if I wanted to be scared of beautiful butterflies, I know what to read next. It's part survival story, there are some sci-fi tropes thrown in, and just like an all-around, supposedly really gory. If you want something that sounds gripping and unique, almost giving me like The Last of Us vibes a little bit, but instead of fungus, it's butterflies, then keep this one in mind. Bookshops and Bone Dust. I think we're all going to be reading this one next month. This is the prequel story to Legends and Lattes, and yes, you can absolutely start with this one if you are the rare human who hasn't read Legends and Lattes yet. This book had over 100 reviews already when it was a month out from release, so I know y'all are excited. This follows the brief time in Viv's life before she arrived in the small town of Thune, so it's like an introduction to her character before we get those main events in book one. It still carries all of the small town cozy vibes. I do wish we could have gotten like an actual sequel, but maybe there is one in the works. Or something brand new. The Curse of Krakens. This is the finale to the Seven Kinnings trilogy, which is set in a vast fantasy world following a cast of characters fighting to protect their land from outside invaders bent on destroying them. If I'm not mistaken, this is Kevin Hearn's first approach to adult epic fantasy, and I've heard that he wraps this up brilliantly and that it's filled with great characters, fabulous world building. So now that it's completed, it would be the perfect series to dive into now. The Darkness Before Them. Spoiler alert, but I'm actually currently reading this one because this is one of my most highly anticipated releases of the year. This is Matthew Ward's opening to a brand new fantasy series called the Hellfire Saga, and it also has one of my favorite covers of the year. It's simple, but it's so stylistic and just so beautiful. This takes the idea of an evil immortal king who rules the land and our thief main character who can talk to spirits and seeks revenge after debt destroyed her family. This has every note of fantasy that I love, and so far, so good. Tonight I Burn, a perfect spooky season read. This is a witchy fantasy that features a polyamorous relationship, if that is something you're looking for. So yes, this is a very tension-filled romantasy. We follow a coven of witches who have to burn one of its members every single night, so that witch can cross into the veil to help spirits cross over, but then she comes back the next day. This is a debut author, which is always exciting in my opinion, and I hope it's a good one for those of you who decide to pick it up. Finally, moving along to November 14th, we have System Collapse. If you love the Murderbot series, then you'll be happy to know that not only is there a new installment to continue the story coming out next month, but it's going to be another full-size novel. This one takes place right after Network Effect, and Murderbot is dealing with the fallout slash trauma from that book. Doing my best to be vague here for those of you who aren't caught up or haven't started this series yet. These are such fun, bite-sized sci-fi stories. They are fast-paced, they are funny, heartwarming most of the time. I highly recommend them. They are a very easy sci-fi to digest, and I think they're perfect for fantasy readers. Shadow Baron, another new series installment. This is the sequel to Notorious Sorcerer. I unfortunately did not do my reviewer duty, and I haven't read that first book yet, but that's not going to stop me from binging these both together now. It's set in a city where sorcery is illegal, and our main character finds a mysterious item from another plane of existence and trades it for protection and influence. Yet, it could be what saves the city from the ultimate destruction. It sounds high stakes. The sequel picks up right after the ending of book 1, and I'm excited to see how it all plays out. Moth Town. This is a dark tale that plays with our perceptions of the world. It promotes itself as unsettling and haunting. We follow David as a young child and also as an adult, so we have switching perspectives between before and after, through the loneliness and eeriness of the world like our own, but also not quite our own either. As you can tell, it was very hard to figure out what this book was about because it sounds so mysterious, and it's definitely like keeping all of its info inside itself. I'm trying my best to explain it. What I can say though is the physical edition to this is going to feature illustrations from Chris Riddell, which is really cool. I really like this eerie cover, and I hope the story is just as memorable. The Star and the Strange Moon, the author of A Witch in Time and Ladies of the Secret Circus, the book I really enjoyed, comes a new haunting historical fiction about the magic of film. We're following a fading Hollywood star in the 1960s who is suddenly cast in a French horror film where the lines between fantasy and reality begin to blur. I love the sound of this one. It sounds spooky and unique and explores the dark underbelly of the whole film industry. So be sure to add this one to whatever wish list that you might have. The Temple of Fortuna. We finally have the conclusion to the Wolf Den trilogy, a very well-known historical series centering on characters enslaved in a brothel in Pompeii. But of course, many events have occurred between these books where this one actually sees us in Rome. I've read the first book, and I think these books do a great job allowing us readers explore ancient Greece and many other beautiful locations. So if you're looking for something adventurous yet emotional and captivating, I highly recommend binging these. I do have a physical copy of this book, and all I have to say is that it is beautiful. Moving along to November 21st, I have Defiant. This is a book 4 in the Skyward series. You know, I thought it had felt like it had been a while since book 3 released, and I was right. Understandable, as Brandon Sanderson was secretly writing 4 other novels, but still. This 4th installment is very long awaited in this YA sci-fi that really shines focus on air combat, which is really cool. We have an outcast main character who's maybe not an outcast no longer, but we see her story continued here as she learns how to control her extraordinary powers. This is the conclusion, and I hope it lives up to all of your hype. Warrior of the Wind, one of my own mega highly anticipated releases of the year. My goodness, I cannot wait to have this in my hands. This is the sequel to Son of the Storm, a pre-colonial West African adult fantasy. A fantasy that is so complex, so adventurous, full of dangerous secrets, just overall a wild ride through a beautiful desert landscape, and it looks like that is extending to this sequel. People who have already read this sequel have loved it. I know I'm going to be in that same boat too. Plus this cover, I need a poster. It's so beautiful. Winter Harvest. This is a Demeter and Persephone reimagining from a Greek author, so that's really exciting to hear. And we seem to get a lot of like Hades and Persephone retellings, while Demeter is kind of overlooked, but not in this story. We follow Demeter through the many stages of her life, so it's very chronological, which means it's dark. So we see a lot of dark moments in Demeter's life, as it is a feminist story that highlights a lot of violence, but that's just your typical Greek mythology. If this tickles your fancy, look out for it next month. The Ghost of Beatrice Bird. This is a new novel coming from Louisa Morgan following Beatrice, who has some special abilities where she can see ghosts, and she flees to the Pacific Northwest in hopes to escape the pain and trauma she experiences from having this ability. But she ends up meeting another woman on the island, and they come together to solve some type of mystery. This sounds like a really great spooky read for the season. I love this haunting cover. I think it fits the feel and the sound of the story beautifully. I have read a couple books by this author, so I'm excited to dive more into her work. Finally, moving on to November 28th, we have Godly Heathens, the first book to a new fantasy duology following a non-binary teen living in a small town, but they're not quite your normal teenager. They are actually a reincarnated god from another world, and all the gods from their world are after them. This is tagged as a book of villains, as everyone is kind of messy and awful. Sounds really amazing. It's set in a contemporary setting, yet you have these powerful gods of myth who have to navigate being in human bodies. It's also supposedly very queer. It sounds really cool, very unapologetic, and it's getting great reviews so far. Gwen and Art are in love. I know you might be shocked to see this on my list, as it's not my cup of tea, but I love the cover, and it's very hyped, and it's medieval themed, and I love that. I know many of you are going to be interested in this. Maybe you didn't know about it, but now you do. So I hope that this gets you excited. So like I said, a medieval, historical, queer rom-com. So we have Gwen and Arthur. Gwen is the princess to the English throne, and Arthur is her betrothed, who was selected at birth because of his famous ancestor, King Arthur. And they both hate each other and are thrown together for a summer at Camelot. It sounds funny, cute, sweet, lighthearted, and I just had to throw it on my list. The Kingdom of Sweets. The author mostly known for the Queen of the Tearling series is back with a reimagining of the Nutcracker. Perfect for the upcoming Christmas season, though this is supposedly very dark. I love dark books. We follow twin sisters who have quite the rivalry, as they were both cursed by their grandfather. Clara is all things good and light, while Natasha is forced to stand in her sister's shadow. Well, Clara steals something Natasha really wants, so Natasha makes a bargain with the Sugar Plum Fairy to get her revenge and take back what she sees as hers. Personally, I love heavy, dark, atmospheric reads, so I myself will be checking this one out, as it honestly sounds really cool, and I haven't read a book from this author in years. So maybe she's gotten even better. Like Thunder. This is the brand new sequel to Shadow Speaker, which was recently re-released. It's a very well-known series that mixes both sci-fi and fantasy. The sequel takes place in 2077. We continue the story of the Earth being corrupted and battling other planets after she was hit by nuclear bombs. And then with biological peace bombs. This probably sounds so confusing unless you've read this book. It's kind of insane sounding. And this plot is kind of hitting close to home, as current events in real life are kind of aligning with this book. This author writes beautifully, and her stories are always, though dark, have a hopeful feel to them. So if you've read Shadow Speaker and loved it, you can continue the story soon. And finally, we made it to the end of this video. Congrats, we have one more book left, and it's a big one. And that is The Witch Would Not. This is a new gothic novel about a creepy manor house, and if you guys know me, I love stories centered on a mysterious mansion, and this one is reminding me a lot of Mexican Gothic and Starling House a little bit. We follow Winnie, who gets hired as a governess at Witch Would Not. However, the house is not as it seems. It gives off very sinister vibes. While trying to take care of Robert, she also needs to solve the reason behind why the staff gets tormented. It sounds really fun, and definitely one to look out for, as it's by a very well-known author. Congratulations, you have made it to the end of this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me down below which book that you are most excited about. Tell me any books that I missed, because there are so many books coming out and I can only talk about so many. Give this video a big thumbs up because it really helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you're not. I'd love to have you here, and until we meet again, happy reading.